Welcome back to the Dynasty Nerds YouTube page. I am Garret Price, and I am joined today by my good friend, David Zäch. David is going to talk to us about some things in the analytics world. Now, I'm a dumb jock. There's plenty of things numbers-wise, statistics-wise I miss. So he's going to come in, help explain some things to me and the good folks out there. So David, how you doing, buddy?
Great. Thanks for having me on, and you're being way too humble there with your nerd score and all the numbers you're applying to that. So looking forward to diving
I
in.
appreciate it. I appreciate it. No, the nerd score is a labor of love. So we love doing it. And it's you've been very kind to kind of help us see where it's done well, where it's fallen short, and that's been really, really helpful. So, David, before we get into all the things that we're going to get into, and there's going to be a whole host of stuff. But one of the things that you've done over the years that I know you're very proud of and you've done a fantastic job with is your Z-score. And that's something we were just talking about a little bit ago off screen. And it is a beautiful blend of numbers, metrics, analytics. You've even, I think, is your interview score part of the Z-score?
For the wide receivers, it is now. It's been too good not to put into it, so I've had to.
There you go.
Had to
So you can even
in.
explain that, like lots of cool things that you're doing. So, tell us what the Z score is, and then if you want to share, I know you have some numbers on it too that you can share with the good folks watching on YouTube.
Sure. So I'll just kind of briefly walk through it. So they went live on the Dynasty Nerds site. I think it was 2 weeks ago now. So they kind of take a look, just like you said, it looks at metrics that matter for fantasy points. So there's so many numbers out there. You're constantly hit with different stats or little blurbs that you see on Twitter or TV or whatever it is about how much this stat matters, or Ezekiel Elliott's yards before contact are this, so that makes him bad now, and all kinds of different stuff. So what I try to weed through is I'm always tracking, hundreds of different stats. I'm seeing what correlates the most to fantasy points per game, and then testing to see if those are predictive or not. And if they hold up all those things, then I'll include them into a model, or in this case for rookies, for rookie wide receiver and running backs, I call it the fantasy Z-score. And like you said, it takes an analytics blend, so the yards per route run for wide receivers, and market share, and film grades that have a tangible number to them. So like the nerd score, that's a beautiful example of that. They've weighted different aspects of film, like body control and hands and speed, and they apply different weights as it matters to fantasy points to give you an overall grade. And they've done very well with that, even right out of the gate, out of their first year. It's actually gotten better over time. So they're very much playing the long game with their film scores, whereas I see like on NFL.com or Scouts Inc., they're very more nearsighted. So it seems like they're trying to fall in line more with draft capital. And I mentioned this to you and Jared in the chat before, but your guys seems to get stronger with time, whereas their kind of fades off or stays the same. So that's some of the stuff you can learn as you go through it. But yeah, I can share if you guys want to get a peek behind the scenes.
Put that
here.
up, man. Yeah, put that
All
good
right.
stuff up. And no, I appreciate the compliment on the nerd score. That's something that we've worked really hard at, and it is cool to kind of see where the successes have been. And yeah, we're not trying to predict draft capital. We're literally just trying to say, hey, here's who we think is best. Great example this year. For me, Rasheen Ali was my 5th rated running back. Did I think he was going to be the 5th rated running back off the board? No, I knew he probably was going to be somewhere between 10 and 15. But on tape, I thought he was the 5th best, and so we try to stay very, very true to the best of our abilities to what we see on tape. So break this down. What are we looking at? What do all these numbers and grades and all that represent? And then what's the final thing that we should really be paying attention to when we see the nerd score or the Z score?
Sure. So if you're an audio listener, this is going to be a little hard, but I'll do my best to explain verbally what's going on. So I got my spreadsheet of rookie running back data over the years. I think it goes back to 2014. What we're looking at is 2024. And I put in a bunch of different metrics. Their college team, SRS is their team strength according to College Reference. That's just like how you grade. Texas is a really strong team, so they get a 20 according to Sports Reference. Their strength of schedule, draft pick, all these things, weight, combine measurables, rushing yards per game, the split of that, broken tackle rate, adjusting that for strength of schedule. So, breaking 37% of tackles for Marshawn Lloyd is especially better considering his strength of schedule, so that made it even stronger. And that's a pretty good metric on its standalone. You got a bunch of film grades in there, and as you scroll across, this is kind of me putting them all together. So I gave them a letter grade so that it's more digestible to people who don't like numbers as much. So if
Sure.
you're listening to this and you're not a big numbers guy, you can just look at the grades or weight what you want to weight. So I've tried to blend them. You can see the correlation to points per game on top there, whether that's years 1 through 3, or you can, some people weigh it differently. But yeah, I kind of have a lot of extra stuff going on here, but this here is the base of what you see in the report. So we're looking at draft capital, gives them a grade of expected points per game, athleticism score, college production, film grades, and I combine quite a few of those to get an average. That includes the nerd score. And then this one's lack of fantasy competition. I grade out how many points per game are being scored in the current backfield that they landed at and give them a grade. And that's a pretty strong indicator. So a lot of people are really big on, I don't even know how to say his name, Kamani Vidal.
Yeah, Vidal, I think.
Is that? Sorry if I butchered it.
I think. I don't know. Maybe I've been saying it wrong.
But his lack of competition gives him an A for that, and that gives him just an instant 2 point per game boost, just because he's got an easier path to volume and fantasy points than his peers. So combine them all together, give him a final grade, and an expected 3-year output for that. So that's a really quick, rough overview of it. I got a lot of other stuff going on in different models that I'm always back checking, but something I suggest to a lot of people if they are looking to get into data or analytics for fantasy is to just start gathering data and put correlation to points per game on the top line here. So you can freeze that frame and it's measuring everything below it, what matters most. You can see a lot of these are really close to each other and how much they matter. Completely different categories, but they carry similar weight, so when we blend them together, we get the strongest output we get as far as predicting points per game.
It's beautiful. It is a massive undertaking, I'm sure, to get all of these things, all of these numbers, all of these metrics together in one place. How often would you say that you put all this together and you end up being surprised by your own results, where you're like, I would have sworn that this guy would have been here and this guy would have been here, and I'm surprised at the numbers, or the letters in this case, that it got spit out?
Surprised is, I don't know if that's the right word, because I don't come in with too many preconceived expectations. I don't watch college football, which is probably a sin for a lot of dynasty goers out there. But I really love the NFL, so I'm all on board as soon as they become a rookie. I want to know everything about them, and then that's how I kind of dive into there. But yeah, it is fun seeing people pop. So like a low drafted player that pops in a couple metrics, like Ramondre Stevenson did a few years back.
Yeah,
he had really strong athleticism score in college production, but he had poor draft capital and film grade, so I was very high on him, and that worked out very well in the short term, and still even now he's still holding on to a starting job pretty well. So it's fun to see guys like those that come through. So it's obviously wrong on plenty of the top guys as well, but
sure, yeah, no, there's no such thing as a perfect model, or batting 100 when it comes to, or I guess batting 100 wouldn't be good, batting 1,000 when watching prospects or whatever. But there are definitely things that lend themselves better and worse. Now, one thing before we move on and we get into some of the questions that I want to ask you, just kind of concerning analytics and what we should be thinking and knowing. One of the things I saw that you got a decent amount of pushback for this year was on the athleticism score. And so if you wouldn't mind just kind of explaining how you get to that conclusion, because I know some people were talking specifically about, combine numbers and how can you give a guy a lower score than this guy for that. So how did you get to the spot that you did on your athleticism score?
Okay, yeah. So I try to very clearly explain it every year, and a lot of people will skim through and just see athleticism and think combine. And then
Sure.
that's it, right? Like a guy ran a fast 40, his athleticism should be through the roof, right? So in this sense, it's as it relates to fantasy points, and it's how I perceive football athleticism. And to me, that isn't just a track contest at the combine, who can jump highest and run the fastest. If your combine athleticism is not translating to the field, what's it actually worth? So in this case, that's a third of the puzzle. The other parts are broken tackle rate, adjusted for strength of schedule. So if a guy's strong at breaking tackles, is that not athletic, is my point of view in that. So that
Sure.
stat goes into athleticism. And then another view I had that when did I make this? 5 or 6 years ago, was that a good athlete is going to have dual roles or be able to do multiple things. So I also factor in how that athleticism produces on the field in various ways. So a guy that is a rusher and a receiver gets a big boost in athleticism because he can do multiple things and can do them well. Or, kick, punt, return, stuff like that. So those are the three categories. And the part that throws people off is seeing an F or a D for like a guy like Isaac Garendo, who had just an outstanding speed score. And he did.
Sure.
But his total production of that translating to the field was not as strong. And his broken tackle rate was really low. So that's why he's getting a D. So I have to do a better job of conveying that, or I don't know. Do you have any tips for me on that one, on how to explain that better?
Yeah, I don't know, man. That's a tough one because it's what we've learned about our culture is the less I can read and get to the conclusion I want to get to, the better. And so people don't want to read any more than they have to. So athleticism, I have my predetermined definition of athleticism, and if your definition doesn't match mine, then you're wrong. It's basically how it works out.
People came out of the woodworks there to just tell me how dumb I was. So I don't know. Maybe I am. We'll see. Huh?
No, disagree. Strong disagree. All right, so let's get into some of the more generic things as far as analytics go. So obviously you've done a fantastic job of kind of taking a lot of the things that matter the most, putting them into the Z-score. So, a quick way is just to go to the Z-score, see how things grade out, and that's one good way to kind of determine, hey, what actually matters. You've done a lot of that work for them. But if people are a little more old school, will want to do their own digging, their own searching, what are things that you would recommend as far as what do they pay attention to? How do they find the data? Like, where do they start?
Sure. Yep. So similar to what we were talking about with the correlation to points per game, if you just start putting together data from Sports Reference is a great resource, right? They have college data for years and years and most of the metrics that we need. So you can just put that into an Excel sheet or Google Sheets like I had and run a correlation on the top to see how much it does matter to NFL points per game. And you can do that for however many years back. I have a pretty firm belief that if you're going too far back, it becomes not helpful because you're looking at an archaic method of stats and how they're correlating. So I always try to trim. I had roughly 10 years in there, but I'm only using about 5 years of it going into the past. So I'm always cutting off about the 5th year in the past. So that's one way to look at it. There's always interesting stuff out there on Twitter. That's where I find a lot of stuff, like and the nerd score from you guys. There's always people doing new things that help you think about things differently. So if you everyone knows about yards per game or yards per carry, right? But if you're just trying to look at something in a different light, you could build a model yourself. So like we were just talking about athleticism score, I thought of an idea. I thought it mattered. I put the metrics that I thought. I probably had more in there at some point than I needed, so I trimmed it down to those 3 categories, and out came athleticism score. So you could create your own models very easily as well. It's just mixing and matching, whether that's, linear regression or doing some kind of chart. A really nice way that I have found to see how much a metric matters and if there's like a fall off is to just do a scatter plot against points per game. So if you take yards per carry against points per game, you're going to see, dots everywhere in a non-organized fashion. That means it doesn't mean much. Whereas if you put yards per route run for a wide receiver, it's going to be a line that's kind of going up like that. So it kind of holds some weight and it has a trend that can carry value for you. So that's one of my favorite things to do is that scatter plot. That helps you visualize the data a lot better. It's one thing to just see a number, right? A lot of people that doesn't resonate with, but if you see a chart and you can see a flow to it, then you can do more with that.
No, that makes perfect sense. So let's go to, whether it's rookies or whether it's NFL. Well, let's start with rookies. When looking at college production for the NFL, how much should we be worried about looking at college production? How predictive is that? So if I take a running back that has 1,200 yards and 15 touchdowns versus a guy that has 800 yards and 8 touchdowns, how predictive is one guy going to be better than the other, in your opinion?
Yep. Yeah, so that was right along the lines of what I'm trying to accomplish in the Z-score, right? And
yeah,
a lot of people will cite raw numbers like that, and I like to adjust them for team and opponent strength. Guy that plays at Texas, like we were talking about, Jonathan Brooks, his production of getting to 1,000 yards is more impressive considering the competition he had to play against on his own team and the competition he faced from other teams. Whereas if a guy like, I don't know what Ray Davis's strength of schedule is off the top of my head, but him getting to 1,000 yards against weaker competition is an easier feat. So we can adjust those and kind of do a scaling factor that makes them meet, give them the appropriate weight. And that's how I've measured production. Sure. And that has held very well over time. I know J.K. Dobbins had an off-the-charts production scale on his score, so it's been really sad to see him banged up all the time and see his flashes when he's healthy, but he's the epitome of production score in my mind, or so far anyway.
Yeah, he crushed me too. He had one of the highest grades that I've given out to a running back in my time doing this.
Wow.
And to never get to see if I was right or not has really hurt because
yeah.
I mean, overall, you in some ways you have to consider it a loss because he never actually put up the numbers. But we all know that that's not a fair test of it. It was injuries. So and maybe he defies the odds and is the one guy that can come back from a knee and an Achilles and whatever else. Like yeah. he can come back from that. That would show that he really was something because we haven't really seen that happen at the NFL level to a great extent. Right. So fingers crossed. So production wise, I think that's really good to keep in mind. We kind of have to keep in mind the competition that they're going against, and that plays a pretty big role. But what do you do with guys like Cody Schrader this year from Missouri? The guy played at an SEC school. He put up numbers. He had 1,600 yards and monster season, but doesn't get. I don't think he got drafted. Went undrafted, and do you in that case is the draft capital kind of the ultimate equalizer in that, and you kind of allow that to speak for what the NFL really thinks of his production, or does somebody like that still pop because they put up such good numbers against such good competition?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. So in my models, I know everyone does it differently, right? I try to build my models for players that are taken in the top 4 rounds because I want to differentiate the ceiling of guys. People who are going to be busts or really break out at, guys you're taking in the first 2 rounds of your fantasy rookie drafts. But to your point, a guy with that low a draft capital is never going to pop in an analytic model because the hit rate on undrafted free agents is so low, or 7th round picks or what have you. But what I always tell people after that caveat is find your reason. Find your reason for a player that's going late. They don't need to have a good overall profile. Cody Schrader's not going to because his draft capital is so low, and who knows what other metrics he's severely lacking in. But like you said, his reason is production pops, or maybe one of you guys like his film or something like that. So that's all you need, is to have something that separates them from that low tier. Everyone looks really similar, but then you have a guy like Isaac Grendo who has a really high speed score. So like, okay, that pops right there. That's something that grabs my attention. You no longer need a holistic profile when you're looking at round 5 or later rookies. You just need to find your
something
reason.
to hold on to.
Yes, find your reason. Yeah.
No, that makes absolutely perfect sense. For what it's worth, I'm not a big Cody Schrader guy, but I was just curious how that kind of would work out for you overall.
The perfect example of that actually is Puka Nacua and his yards per route run that really popped, but the rest of his profile didn't look so good. So, and a lot of the film scores were really low too, but there was one thing that popped, is his yards per route run, right? So he was another find your reason guy. Or you could go by camp blurbs. That could be your reason, right? That's very fair. And what's her name with the Rams? That reporter, Jordan Rodriguez.
Jordan Rodriguez, yeah.
Yeah, she was incredibly, hyping him up all the time. So that that's a pretty good reason. A drum beat from a good reporter that you trust. That's another reason. But.
No, that makes perfect sense. All right, so we're starting to understand what we should be looking for, what matters, what doesn't. Then how do we take all of the information? Let's say we're not somebody that is gifted in the spreadsheets. It's just not our arena, not our lane. We don't get numbers like the rest of the people do. But all right, I see these stats. I know that these stats kind of matter. Then how do I take that and determine who I trade for, who I draft, how do I make these numbers become players that help me?
That's a pretty loaded question. So you're saying for someone who doesn't like numbers or understand outputting into like a points per game model or something like that?
Yeah. Like say, okay, we finally, maybe I can't do the model, but I see it and I see what you did. Should I now just follow this yards per route run and just draft guys based on yards per route run? Or how do I take these and know who to trade for? How do I take these metrics and know who to draft? Like, how do I meld these things other than just, well, his ADP is roughly right and he's got good yards per route run? Like, how do we meld these things in together to know who we should be taking and trading for?
Sure. So I guess the deep answer on how I do that is I do get, a projected points per game, but then I mold that into points above replacement player, and I'm able to build my own ADP off of my projections, so I do full team projections for every player as well. And then that creates an ADP. I was very accurate on the underdog one that came off as how close to where guys would be going, round 1, round 2 players, solely based off of points above replacement player. So that was kind of like a small internal victory for me there.
For sure.
Being able to build that out. But if you're not looking to go to that depths, it kind of is just what you said then. If you're not building a model to output something like that, you have a list of rankings or ADP, right? And then if you find a metric that that matters, and 2 guys are right next to each other, and your metric that you like, if it's routes per route run, is better on this guy than this guy, then you should just flip them in your ranks, and that's how you should draft them, would be my opinion. I always like to take a blend of my own thoughts or my ranks and ADP. That way you're not jumping the shark or waiting too long to grab someone, because all that matters is what someone else thinks about a player if he's going to go before you, right? Like if they're high on him,
right,
ADP,
just takes one guy.
Yeah. So that's why I like to blend both, so that I'm not reaching too much and that I know when he's going to be gone by. And that's how I'd kind of do it, I guess, is you could just build out your own handwritten sheet if you don't want to put out all the numbers, and then order your rankings based on what you like about a guy. But don't get too crazy with it. Meet in the middle somewhere, because ADP is a good resource. I mean, there's a reason they have a consensus of where they are, and Caleb Williams is the first quarterback taken off. It's because he's probably pretty good. So don't overhype yourself thinking you know more than, or that much more than the masses, that you can take Xavier Worthy 101 or something like that over him in a super
there
flex.
You go. Especially when you don't have to.
Right.
When you don't have to. David, this has been awesome. Genuinely appreciate your insight, your knowledge in this topic. Anything that you want to touch on, tell the people where they can find you, what you're working on, anything like that.
Yeah, you can find me at Twitter at David Zäch 16, and I do very few articles these days. I kind of got ground down by some of that, but I do the Fantasy Score with Nerds and a couple other things, but my main thing is the Freaks in the Spreadsheets PDF that I make. It's full team and player projections. It has the Z-score in there. It'll have all my rankings. It has best ball theory, dynasty theory, redraft theory. It's going to be a lot more condensed this year. It got way too long last year, so it'll be a lot of charts, so you can just skim it, use what you need, don't use the rest, and move on with your life. So, or bookmark it, save it for later, and so on.
And you just give that out, right?
Yep. If you want to donate at the end, you sure can, but you don't have to.
Yeah.
I just enjoy helping people out and learning from each other. So I've learned all my stuff from free stuff that's been out there, or stuff that I've liked, that I've subscribed to. So it's a constant learning loop that you get good feedback from.
Well, absolutely donate to what David Zäch's doing, because the guy puts in work. He puts in absolute work. And I know I personally benefit from all the work that he does. So, David, thank you so much for joining me, breaking down this topic. And for all of you guys out there, thank you so much for tuning in. Lots more coming out on the YouTube page. So make sure you stay locked in, and we'll see you next time.